if I was an ACC fan, there would possibly be some concern, mainly for just a couple of teams, though. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode on the College Underdogs YouTube channel. I am your host, Trey Smith, and we are the spot for the underdog conferences in college football. Today, we're going to look at the realignment story of the winter and spring seasons and seeing how that could potentially impact expansion at the G5 level. I think with what I'm going to unpack today, depending on how these dominoes fall, including a court session that's happening right now as I record this video, we could see some more relegation in college football, similar to what we saw last summer when the PAC conference imploded and how Washington State and Oregon State essentially got demoted to G5 status, at least for the time being. I think their next move is contingent on this ACC domino that's sort of swaying back and forth, waiting to fall. We're not sure which direction it's going to go, but I'm going to kind of look at some of that today and see how that might impact the underdog conferences as well. Before I dive into it all, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, like the video. Please like the video. Subscribe if you're not a subscriber, especially if you're a fan of G5 football or you have a team in one of the G5 conferences. Please subscribe to the channel, turn the notifications on, watch this video all the way through, leave a comment at the end, and then share it with a friend. And I greatly appreciate it. We're continuing to grow and take over more territory here on the College Underdogs YouTube channel. All right, so let's get into this. So the implosion of the ACC, that has been the sort of theme, top storyline of the winter and spring seasons. Of course, I think what we've seen over the last 18 months or so, maybe even longer than that, probably 24 months. Gosh, yeah, I guess it's been a while. Maybe since the bombshell dropped that UT and OU were headed to the SEC is when it seems like realignment just became the forefront of all of college football discussions. Obviously, I talk about it here on this channel, talked about it a lot last summer, but also try to stay true to talking ball as well. And if you've been around, you know that. But just to kind of give some cliff notes, if you will, for those of you that haven't maybe been following what's going on with the ACC. So depending on who you listen to or who you read, you could think that the ACC's implosion is inevitable. Whereas I tend to take a different stand on that simply because it's not quite as cut and dry as it was last summer with the PAC. See, the PAC, it was just different. They didn't have a media deal. It was set to expire. They didn't have a grant of rights. And you could just tell with how often they continued to push their deadlines back. We covered that whole process very closely right here on this channel. And then eventually at the 11th hour, everything imploded. And really everyone found a landing spot except for two teams. Well, initially except for four teams. And then two of those four sort of financially maneuvered their way into the ACC along with SMU, leaving Oregon State and Washington State stranded. I don't think it's as cut and dry with the ACC. However, what's making this ACC implosion story gain so much steam is the fact that it was put out there earlier, I think actually in the winter was when this was first released by The Athletic, that in 2025, so less than a year from now, because it's February 2025, ESPN has the option to do a look-in at the ACC contract agreement and decide if they want to extend it past 2027. At least that's my understanding of it. They will have the option to not extend that agreement, meaning that the ACC's deal with ESPN could be done as soon as 2027. And we would know that as soon as February 2025. Now, what would cause ESPN to do that is if the ACC somehow lost its value. Well, how in the world could the ACC lose its value when they've got this quote-unquote ironclad grant of rights in place? I've been calling it ironclad. I felt like it was. But Clemson and Florida State right now are fighting tooth and nail to get out of that so that they can leave the conference. And if you have those two teams leave the ACC, that's what then devalues or lessens the value of the conference that could cause a network like ESPN to come in and say, yeah, we're not going to extend this thing beyond 2027. And then that's, to me, when this thing could become open season for the Big Ten, the SEC, and the Big 12. So really, February 2025, now obviously there's going to be some things to pay attention to between now and then, such as the court session that's happening right now between the ACC and Florida State. I've been kind of trying to follow the updates there as well, but they're still in session as I'm recording this video. So that's essentially what has given legs to this implosion. I do think it's more than just fear-mongering rumors. I do think there's some legitimacy here that if I was an ACC fan, there would possibly be some concern, mainly for just a couple of teams, though. Because I think if the conference does implode, pretty much all the teams are going to find a landing spot. But as we saw a year ago, man, when I was on here covering that, I was confident every Pac-12 team was going to find a Power 4 landing spot. And I was wrong. I remember Oregon State fans, which if you're still around, thank you for continuing to follow the channel. But I remember having conversations in the comments where Oregon State fans were genuinely concerned they were going to be relegated if this thing blew up. And I was like, no, there's no way they get relegated. They're going to find a landing spot with either the ACC, the Big 12. Someone's going to pick them up. And now here we are a year later. And I mean, they've got the funds to survive, another year, maybe two. But they're going to be needing to make some moves quickly. And I know, obviously, if you're an Oregon State or Washington State fan, your ideal scenario would either be that the ACC does not implode, or that they only lose a couple of teams and then are able to add your team into the fold, or that the Big 12 comes calling. I don't know how likely either of those scenarios are at this point. I think, honestly, what the Pac has to wait on, they don't have to wait on it, but I think what they will wait on is to see how the dominoes with the ACC fall. The other part of this that is still unclear to me, I have not been able to find an answer, is the grant of rights is through 2036. Now, Clemson and Florida State may find a way out of that. I would imagine it's going to cost a significant amount of money. But if ESPN chooses not to extend the deal, and the ACC still has this grant of rights, is it still active? Or is a grant of rights contingent on, I know it's contingent on the conference having a media partner, but what does that look like in a scenario where the media partner says, yep, we're not going to extend beyond 2027? Does that mean the grant of rights expires in 2027 unless the ACC finds another partner, like maybe they go with the CW, and if it's of equal value or more, the grant of rights stays put, but if they find another partner and the value decreases, does that give teams an opt-out of the grant of rights? That's where the contracts and all that stuff, I don't claim to be an expert on any of it, but that is something that I've thought about with this is, okay, if ESPN says next February, hey, we're not going to extend this deal, and I think the biggest dominoes that have to fall there is Florida State and Clemson would have to leave or find a way out to go to another conference. So if that were to happen, the current teams that would still be in the ACC, do they now have a way out? I know like last year, one of the big points of discussions with the Pac was, you can't get those schools to sign a grant of rights unless there is a media partner in place. But what if the grant of rights is already signed and the media partner that was in place pulls out because of their contractual ability to? So there's your bird's eye view, a quick nutshell of what's going on with the ACC and the whole implosion thing. Those of you that haven't really been following it. And I know I probably left some stuff out, which if you've been following it closer, please feel free to leave it in the comments. But those are, to me, the most important points as it pertains to this situation. So is it looking like a possible outcome that the ACC could in fact implode? Yes, absolutely. How likely? At this juncture, I'm not sure and don't care to comment on that. But what I do think is worth exploring is if it does happen and you start to have teams jumping ship to the Big Ten, the SEC, and the Big 12, which teams, A, would be left over, and then B, where would their landing spots be? And I want to play you a quick clip of something Paul Finebaum said, I think it was about a week and a half ago when he was talking about this. And listen, I don't take Paul Finebaum as gospel. I know he's kind of a polarizing figure, and people, either love him or hate him. And I know he's obviously just an SEC guy, and he's always, anything he discusses tends to have a slant towards SEC or SEC bias, whatever you want to call it. But last year, he offered his comments on the Pac-12 situation, and they were pretty spot on. In fact, there's a video on this channel where I played a clip from, I don't remember what podcast he was on when he said it, and I gave my reaction. And the reason why is because obviously Paul Finebaum is in a lot of rooms. He talks to a lot of people. He hears a lot of things. And I don't think that him saying what I'm about to play you is something that should just be disregarded. So basically, I think it's on Greg McElroy asks him, hey, we've seen in the past where it looks like publicly, outwardly, that conferences are uniting together and they're playing to help each other out, whereas behind the scenes, it was the exact opposite was happening. And I think that was a reference to the whole alliance, the PAC, ACC, Big Ten alliance that they had formed, a handshake deal only, and then it ended up being what bit the Pac-12 in the behind when USC and UCLA jumped ship to the Big Ten or made that announcement. And so he's kind of saying, is that what's going on here with the ACC? And just I think it's less than a minute. Just hear what Paul Finebaum had to say, and then I'll give my thoughts.
I think the real concern for everyone in this group is what happens if the ACC starts to implode even more than it currently is. And because, there are certain schools that I don't think either league really wants, and then there are those who I think both covet. So I think that's where it would get really sticky. I don't think Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti would sit in a room and go, okay, you take that one, I'll take that one. That's just not the way this works. This is still pretty serious competition at the highest level. But I think that's the one area where I wouldn't be assured. But I think it's mainly, as many have said, it was mainly done from a legislative standpoint. Let's be aligned on the issues. It was done from a judicial standpoint to, in court, let's have the same ideas. I don't know if that carries over to competition. Frankly, the television deals are already done. The only thing that really is left to be determined in the next couple of years of college athletics is if the ACC implodes, who gets those schools and how do they get them?
So you hear him talking about how if this conference implodes, if the ACC implodes, not every school is going to be desirable. And he was specifically talking about to the SEC and Big Ten, but I would also venture into saying that would go for the Big 12 as well. I think you would see teams, obviously the Big Ten and SEC would have their pick of the litter, so to speak, their first dibs. I'm not going to speculate on any of that. And then the Big 12 would take, whoever they wanted out of who remained. What I want to look at is who potentially is in danger of being relegated. And that's where I think we have to look at Cal, Wake Forest, Boston College, and then I've also kind of got Stanford and SMU with asterisks next to them, and I'll explain why well, I guess I'll explain right now. I think Stanford has an asterisk next to them because of their relationship with Notre Dame. I think if Notre Dame were to end up deciding that they wanted to join the Big Ten, well, I guess it would be the Big Ten in this scenario with the ACC imploding, they could leverage, they could use their leverage to get Stanford in as well. I believe that. I've said that before. However, if not, Stanford and Cal, I think the most sensible thing for them would end up being going back to the Pac. And we now go back from Pac-2 to Pac-4, right? We were Pac-4, then we went to Pac-2, now we're back to Pac-4. Would be a scenario there. And I'll talk about what that could look like in a second. SMU, on the other hand, the knee jerk is to think, oh, they would just be right back in the American Conference. I don't know. I'm not so sure SMU couldn't leverage their way into one of the remaining Power 3 conferences. And the main reason why I believe that is, one, because they're in the Dallas market, and that helps when it comes to these media negotiations. And two, you could get them in pretty cheap. I mean, they're already foregoing media revenue for, what was it, the first 7 years, 5 or 7 years or something like that. So they've got enough money to sustain themselves where you could literally add them for the market and then not have to give them a piece of the pie. And why wouldn't you do that if you were one of the Power 3 conferences? And really, if this were to happen, I don't know why you wouldn't just, the Big 12 wouldn't bring them in with the already heavy presence they have in Texas. But the three, though, I think for sure would be in danger if the ACC imploded, or Wake Forest, Boston College, and Cal. Cal goes back west. If Stanford doesn't end up getting into one of the power conferences on the coattail of Notre Dame, maybe they come together, they go back with the Pac-4, and it would be interesting what they would do, because I think one of the options that the Pac conference has as of today is some sort of merger with the Mountain West. I don't think you see a merger if Stanford and Cal are involved, because they're not going to want to be a part of a conference with some of those lower tier teams in the Mountain West. So that complicates what they do as well. And then maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Stanford and Cal would get picked up by somebody. Maybe they'd get picked up by the Big Ten. I don't know. But I think where we could potentially see some expansion in the American Conference is with Wake Forest and Boston College. I think Boston College helps with that northeastern region where you've got Temple right now, and putting Boston College there on the coast. And you've got Wake Forest, obviously with ECU and Charlotte. You'd add Wake Forest into that Carolina presence. I think it would be good for the conference. Obviously, it would be a worst case scenario for Wake Forest and Boston College, but I think getting those two teams could enhance your product for your next media negotiations whenever that comes up. But let me know your thoughts on that. I do think it could help the conference. And then if you're a West Coast fan, Mountain West, how do you think the potential of Stanford and Cal reuniting with the Pac-2 impacts that relationship between the Pac and the Mountain West? That's it for me today. Trey Smith, College Underdogs.